Leora Vance was the picture of elegance, Grant Vance the ideal husband, and their daughter Tessa, the quiet heart of their perfect world, until a romantic family getaway exposed a secret so dark it shattered their flawless image forever. Leora Vance had always curated a life that looked like a dream. With her camera slung across her shoulder and a gallery filled with radiant sunsets, cobblestone streets, and intimate family moments, she built an image of serenity. Her husband, Grant Vance, was equally admired. A quiet tech mogul who kept his world private, he was known for creating a software company from his college dorm and selling it for millions before his 40th birthday. Their daughter Tessa was a soft-spoken child who preferred pencils and paper to gadgets, often sketching trees and animals with surprising depth for her age. They lived in a clean-lined house outside the city, attended school events together, and hosted carefully organized dinner parties. On social media, their life seemed warm and full. No cracks ever showed when Grant proposed a vacation to celebrate the sale of his company. Leora quickly agreed. It would be a break from the hectic pace of their lives, a time to reconnect as a family. The destination was a secluded lakeside villa tucked away in the forested mountains. Riley Dorn, Leora's old friend and now her travel agent, had found the perfect spot, luxurious, isolated, and bathed in natural beauty. The trip was supposed to be a reset. 1 week to recharge, reflect, and breathe. They arrived late on a Sunday afternoon. The air was crisp and the sky cloudless. Tessa ran barefoot on the wooden deck, her laughter echoing against the water. Leora took pictures as soon as they unloaded their bags. The shimmering lake, the wide windows of the villa, Grant helping Tessa skip stones. That night, they lit the fireplace, made cocoa, and watched old home videos. It was a moment that felt like peace. But it didn't last. On the second day, Leora posted her last photo, a view of the lake from the bedroom window, a caption underneath it that read, "Exactly where we need to be." After that, her page went dark. No updates. No tagged locations. Her friends noticed, but didn't think much of it at first. People needed breaks from their phones. But by day 4, messages to Leora started to go unanswered. A close friend sent a message to Grant, no reply. Another texted Riley to ask if she had heard from them. Riley didn't respond either. What followed was a slow-building sense of unease. A delivery driver reported arriving at the villa on Wednesday, with supplies ordered by Grant, but no one answered the door. He saw lights on inside, but assumed the family was out hiking. On Friday, a fisherman found a canoe drifting at the far end of the lake. Inside it was a single pink sneaker and a water-damaged children's sketchbook with Tessa's name scribbled on the inside cover. It wasn't until that discovery that the local sheriff's office was contacted. By Saturday morning, officers arrived at the property. The villa door was unlocked. Everything inside appeared untouched. Dishes were still in the sink, beds were made, and Leora's camera rested on the living room couch. Her laptop was open, but powered off. There was no blood, no broken glass, no visible signs of violence, but something was off. A faint smell of damp earth and wood smoke lingered in the air, as though someone had tried to mask another scent. In Tessa's bedroom, the stuffed bear she never traveled without was missing. Authorities launched a full search of the area. Helicopters swept the surrounding woods. Divers were sent into the lake, and tracking dogs followed vague trails into the trees only to lose the scent entirely. As the sun set behind the mountain ridge that night, casting long shadows over the still waters, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a disappearance. This was something far darker. And whatever had happened to the Vance family, it had been planned, quiet, and disturbingly precise. Detective Emmerich Halen had seen many cases that began quietly and unraveled into chaos, but the Vance disappearance felt different from the start. The pristine condition of the villa, the sudden silence from a woman who practically lived through her lens, and the lack of any digital footprints set off alarms. Families didn't just vanish without reason. Something had happened between that last shared photo and the moment the pink sneaker floated to the surface. He began with the timeline. Sunday evening, the family arrived. Monday and Tuesday, there were signs of life lights on, groceries delivered, and cell towers pinging their phones. By Wednesday morning, the signal stopped. No texts, no calls, no posts. It was as if the Vance family had been erased. The security cameras installed on the villa grounds were disabled. Not broken, simply turned off. Someone had known they were there. That suggested planning. Inside the villa, Helen noticed subtle inconsistencies. 2 wine glasses had been cleaned and placed on the kitchen rack, but there was a third still on the counter with a faint lip print. Leora's jewelry box was missing 1 bracelet. A fire pit near the lake held ashes that were too recent, yet nothing was scheduled to be burned. Most curious was Tessa's sketchbook. Its final drawing showed a strange image, what looked like 2 tall figures in the woods, staring toward the house. It was unlike her usual gentle nature scenes. As the investigation widened, one name kept surfacing, Riley Dorn. She was more than just Leora's travel agent. She was a lifelong friend, often described by Leora in captions as my anchor or the sister I chose. But no one had heard from Riley since the Vances left for their trip. Her phone was turned off, her apartment was empty, and her office reported she had taken unexpected leave. Helen pulled her financials and discovered a plane ticket purchased 2 days after the Vance family arrived at the villa. A one-way flight to Belize, paid in cash, under a different name. But she had never boarded the flight. Security footage showed her entering the airport, but never checking in. Meanwhile, search crews combed the lake and surrounding woods. On the 4th day, divers located something sunken and wedged between rocks. It was Grant Vance. His body showed no outward injuries, but the autopsy revealed he had been heavily sedated before drowning. The toxicology report found a strong dose of lorazepam in his system, enough to put him into a deep, unresponsive sleep. It was not an accident. Someone had deliberately rendered him helpless and left him to die underwater. The discovery shifted the case from a disappearance to a homicide. But the questions multiplied. Where were Leora and Tessa? Why had Grant been targeted? And what role, if any, had Riley played in this? Halen turned back to digital forensics, focusing on Leora's cloud backups. He found deleted photo files, images that had been manually erased during the trip. A few were recovered. They were quiet, eerie snapshots. Leora sitting alone by the lake at night. A shadow near the cabin that didn't match anyone in the family. And one, the most telling, showing Riley standing in the villa doorway, her face pale, expression unreadable. Further investigation revealed something even more disturbing. A hidden account had been created under Grant's name, receiving large wire transfers from an unknown source over the past 6 months. The last deposit had been made 2 weeks before the trip, then withdrawn in full, days before his death. The financial paper trail led nowhere, but its existence hinted at blackmail, secrets, or betrayal. The deeper Halen looked, the clearer it became that this was not a random act of violence or a spontaneous argument gone wrong. Someone had orchestrated every detail with methodical precision. Tension grew within the investigative team. Every lead deepened the mystery. Who killed Grant? Why were Leora and Tessa still missing? Was Riley a victim too, or the mastermind behind it all? As the forest around the villa grew thick with rain and the lake remained still and silent, one truth hovered over the case like mist. Something monstrous had happened in that house, and only those who survived knew the full horror of it. The lake was cold, black, and unforgiving. The discovery of Grant Vance's body had brought clarity to one part of the mystery, but opened an abyss of darker questions. Detective Emmerich Halen kept circling back to the same point, Someone had drugged Grant, drowned him, and vanished without leaving a trace. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle inside the house, no blood. Leora and Tessa were still missing, and Riley Dorn's ghost-like disappearance painted a sinister picture. The detective was convinced that someone in that villa had planned it all. But for what purpose, and how had they managed to slip away so cleanly? As divers continued their search, attention turned to a secluded boathouse near the far edge of the lake. Hidden by trees and long forgotten, it didn't appear on the modern property map. Inside, investigators found damp footprints, half-burnt matches, and a child's hair tie. It looked like someone had used the boathouse as a temporary hideout. A search dog picked up a scent trail from the boathouse leading into the woods and then stopping cold near a dirt road. It looked like someone had been picked up by a vehicle. No tire marks remained, but the foliage disturbance suggested a heavy SUV or van. The forensic team also uncovered a significant piece of evidence in the villa's laundry room. Small bundle of charred documents that hadn't completely burned. Among the remnants were pages from what appeared to be a personal journal, with Leora's handwriting. Several lines were still legible. One of them read, "He suspects something. Riley says it's now or never." Another line simply stated, "I never wanted this. Not like this." That was the first moment Hallen began to suspect that Leora had not only been aware of something terrible, but was potentially involved. Grant's murder wasn't random. There was intent, and it went deeper than jealousy or anger. When he re-examined Riley Dorn's financials, another surprise emerged: multiple payments to an offshore account that matched deposits made to Leora months prior. The two women had been moving money in tandem under aliases. That changed the shape of the entire case. Had Leora and Riley been planning an escape? Had Grant discovered their betrayal? Had it turned violent when he refused to play along? But then came a more gut-wrenching revelation. At the lake's northern edge, searchers recovered a large rock wrapped in plastic and smeared with a faint trace of blood. Embedded in the folds of the plastic was a strand of long brown hair, Tessa's. The blood type matched hers. Though not enough to confirm a fatal injury, it was enough to support a disturbing theory. She may not have survived. The public grew restless. The story had captured national headlines. A beautiful family destroyed, a husband dead, a daughter missing, a mother possibly complicit, a friend turned fugitive. Still, no one had seen Leora or Riley in person since the trip began. Then, in a sudden break, surveillance footage from a gas station 50 miles east of the lake showed a blurry figure approaching the shop in the early hours of morning. Her hair was matted, her clothes torn, and her face gaunt with exhaustion. It was Leora. She appeared alone. Clutched tightly in her arms was a stuffed toy, Tessa's bear. Detective Hallen rushed to the station. By the time he arrived, Leora had been transported to a nearby hospital, disoriented and weak. She had no ID and gave only one name, Tessa. Her condition was stable, but her mental state fragile. She whispered fragments of what had happened, just enough to hint that a terrible betrayal had taken place. She claimed she had escaped captivity. She begged them to find her daughter. Leora's reappearance turned the investigation upside down. If she was alive, maybe Riley was too. But where was Tessa? And who had really pulled the strings behind Grant's death? The truth was closer than ever, but so was the possibility that not everyone who survived was telling the full story. Leora Vance lay in a hospital bed, pale and gaunt. The corners of her lips cracked from dehydration. She hadn't spoken to anyone in days, not even the nurses who gently tried to coax answers from her. When Detective Emmerich Hallen finally entered the room, her eyes flickered with recognition, not surprise. Slowly, over the course of hours, she began to tell her version of what had happened at the Villa. According to Leora, the trip was never meant to end in death. She admitted she had been having an affair with Riley Dorn for nearly a year. What had started as emotional support during a difficult patch in her marriage turned into something far more consuming. Grant had been suspicious but never confrontational. Leora claimed she felt trapped, unable to leave him because of their daughter, the public image, and their shared wealth. That's when she said Riley proposed an escape plan. It began subtly. Riley visited the villa 2 days into the vacation, under the cover of night, using a hidden key Leora had left under a flower pot. They had planned to confront Grant and offer him a way out: separation, financial settlement, shared custody. But Grant had found out earlier than expected. Leora described an evening of tension, followed by a violent argument she hadn't anticipated. She said Riley panicked. She brought a syringe and sedatives, claiming it was just to calm Grant down. Leora, desperate and scared, agreed to help. She handed him the wine, laced with the drug Riley had prepared. Minutes later, Grant could barely move. What happened next haunted her every moment. Riley insisted he needed to be removed permanently. Leora claimed she hesitated, begged Riley to stop, but the situation escalated too quickly. Riley dragged Grant to the canoe while he was unconscious. Leora followed in silence, clutching Tessa's bear, unable to scream. She said she watched as Riley rolled Grant into the lake and held his body under the water until it disappeared beneath the surface. Afterward, they returned to the villa in complete silence. That night, Leora tried to run. She took Tessa, packed a bag, and tried to flee through the woods. But Riley had seen her. She caught up to them near the old boathouse. According to Leora, a struggle broke out. Tessa screamed. Riley snapped. She shoved Leora aside and dragged Tessa toward the water. Leora blacked out from a blow to the head, and when she woke, both Riley and Tessa were gone. She wandered in, shocked for what felt like hours, maybe days, until she stumbled upon the gas station where she was found. Detective Halen listened, noting every word, watching Leora's hands tremble with each sentence. Her story was horrifying, but parts of it didn't add up. Forensics had found no fingerprints belonging to Riley inside the canoe. The wine glass on the counter had only Leora's fingerprints. And despite extensive searching, no proof of Riley's presence at the villa had been confirmed other than a single blurred photo. It was enough to question Leora's timeline, if not her entire account. The most damning discovery came when investigators traced a call made from Leora's burner phone days before the trip. The number dialed had belonged to a storage unit rental company 2 towns over. Inside the unit, they found a duffel bag packed with fake passports, cash, and a gun registered to Leora under her maiden name. All the contents were dated and stored weeks before the villa trip. Public opinion began to fracture. Some saw Leora as a manipulated woman, pushed to desperation by a controlling husband and a dangerous lover. Others believed she was orchestrating a false narrative to save herself. The one missing voice in the entire case was Tessa's, and her silence carried the heaviest weight of all. Until her body was found, or she was, no version of the story could be fully believed. Leora's survival offered answers, but even more unsettling, it raised a terrifying question. Had the real mastermind gotten away clean? The trial of Leora Vance and the manhunt for Riley Dorn became the nation's obsession. News outlets swarmed the courthouse, psychologists debated motives on talk shows, and true crime forums dissected every detail with morbid fascination. But inside the courtroom, the mood was grim. Leora was charged with involuntary manslaughter in the death of her husband, obstruction of justice, and suspected involvement in the disappearance of her daughter, Tessa Vance, though she had painted herself as both victim and survivor. The prosecution argued she had been a willing participant until things spiraled beyond her control. The most powerful moment of the trial came when the prosecution presented the recovered journal pages, torn and half-burnt, but still damning. "He suspects something. Riley says it's now or never," one line read. Another, written in different ink and shakier handwriting, said, "I'm afraid of what she's capable of. But it's too late to back out now." These lines left the jury divided. Was she confessing to being trapped or admitting she had chosen to go along with a deadly plan? Then came the evidence from the storage unit. The fake passports, the cash, the weapon, it all suggested premeditation. The prosecution insisted that Leora had plotted an escape, whether with Riley or without her, and that Grant had become a problem she chose to eliminate. Leora's defense argued that she was under Riley's influence, manipulated by fear, love, and desperation. They portrayed her as a woman emotionally cornered and psychologically broken. But the question that lingered, unspoken, was darker. Where was Tessa? Just days before the verdict was expected, a breakthrough came that shifted the narrative once more. In a forest area nearly 80 miles from the villa, hikers stumbled upon a small, moss-covered grave marked by a flat stone. Beneath it, the decomposed body of a child was found, wrapped in a floral blanket identified as belonging to Tessa. A forensic examination confirmed what the prosecution feared. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The injuries did not align with Leora's account of drowning. Someone had struck the child, likely with a rock or similar object, and buried her in haste. A strand of blonde hair found under Tessa's fingernails did not match. Leora or Grant, it was Riley Dorrans. This discovery tilted the scales. Leora's emotional breakdown in the courtroom the following day was raw and devastating. She collapsed while viewing a photograph of the burial site and had to be removed from the courtroom. Though many believed it to be genuine, others questioned if it was carefully timed to sway sympathy. But the strand of hair was physical proof, a thread that finally led investigators to a cabin deep in the mountains where Riley had been hiding under a false identity. Her rest was quiet. She offered no resistance. During questioning, she refused to speak, staring blankly at the wall for hours. When she finally did talk, she offered a story that contradicted everything Leora had said. She claimed that Leora was the one who struck Tessa in a rage, and that she had helped cover it up out of loyalty. She described Leora as cold, manipulative, and entirely in control of every step. Her statement reopened old wounds and stirred public outrage. But it came too late. In the end, Leora was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison. The court could not definitively prove she had killed Tessa, but her actions led to Grant's death and covered up evidence. Riley Dorn, charged with murder and accessory to manslaughter, received a life sentence. Detective Emmerich Halen retired months after the case closed, though he often told colleagues he never truly solved it. Too many lies had been told. Too many truths had been buried. And despite all the evidence, no one would ever really know what happened in those final hours at the Villa. What the world once saw as the perfect family had turned out to be a house of secrets, carefully staged smiles, and an ending no one could have imagined. The lake, the woods, and the silence around that villa would forever echo with the tragedy that unfolded there.